All right, there you go. Cool, we're live. So thanks
Oh,
everyone for joining our Ruby Monday Hangout. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing and Ruby challenges, Ruby problems, and just kind of chatting it up. So feel free to ask questions and contribute to the Hangout in whichever way you want. It's an open forum. So we've been kind of going over the team project the past couple weeks, and the call kind of started turning into just reviewing the group project, but it's interesting to be able to keep it Ruby Monday, where we talk anything Ruby related, just versus just one project. So what we thought we'd do this week and ongoing is just make it go back to kind of like open forum, or maybe deep diving into a Ruby method or Ruby class or something like that, or any questions. I also put up a document on Slack that people can use and add questions that they might be running into, and I'm going to try to promote that throughout the week. So we'll have like a set of Ruby questions to go over when once the Hangout comes by. And we've found that it's a little bit more interactive doing it that way than just going over only one PR, and it keeps things a little bit more interesting, and we learn a lot more. That being said, the project's still going on, but we'd rather have like, hey, I'm stuck in this part of the project, put that as a question to talk about, and then we have something specific to go over. So hopefully that works out. I'm also open to any suggestions that you might have on what would make Movie Monday more interesting for you. So feel free to reach out to me in Slack and or email whatever, and just let me know, and we'll try to implement it. So cool. So we were gonna get started. Jesus, if you don't know, he's working on a course on a RSpec TDD course, and he wanted to share with us a little bit of what he's working on. So go for it, Jesus.
Yeah, so let me share my screen. So this is the cover I made with some program I found online for making covers. So what do you think?
Discover TDD. Hold on, let me a second. Cool. What do you have there? A little compass?
Yeah,
Nice.
and I also have this version that looks like a DVD case,
Are you searching for
and
design now, Jesus? What's going on?
also this version that looks like a book.
Ooh, I like the book one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the book one's pretty cool.
Okay, so I have the courses, an ebook, and 10 videos, and I start with very simple slides. It's a slide presentation, the first video, and explains the benefits of TDD, the red-green refactor cycle, and what do you do during the red phase, and then you need to make the test pass. So that's the first video. And then explain AirSpec. I do an introduction, and then I do a demo of a very simple calculator program where you have to add two numbers. So that's the simple example I call think of. Just adding two numbers. And then I have more advanced aspect where I explain things like LED, context, and the configuration options, and that's also slides. And then the one part that I like, and think you will like too if you take it, the course. I do a tic-tac-toe game, and I explain step by step what I am doing. So I start from nothing, and I code the game, and I showed this game on the last 2 weeks ago. I can show it again if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
It's like so this is the game, and you can say the move you want to make with the row and column, and then it's player 2 and it's player 1 again,
This is what I
and
mentioned last week, right? Just making sure.
yeah. Mhm. So that's the game I recorded. That's 1 hour of videos playing everything from start using TDD. And I also explain how I do it using Atom and the Atom Expert plugin. So that's that. And I also made people keep asking for ideas and exercise to do. So I made a small PDF with 3 projects that you can do with TDD. And that will be a bonus that I will give away with the course.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think that's a very common one. What type of project to work on? Like after you finish some kind of tutorial and do all that, I think people are bored of a to-do app.
Yeah.
And but then it's like you have all these ideas, but then when you actually need to work on one, you go blank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually added links and the documentation you need. I added hints, so if you don't know where to start, you have some ideas. So I don't just say here are these projects you can do. I actually explain the project. I give you hints, um, documentation, everything you need to get started with that project.
Cool, yeah. I think that's good. Where you still give them hints, but you don't have everything hand-holding.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I just went through that a couple days ago. Even though I was following, because I was playing around with React, and I was following this tutorial, but the tutorial was written in it was React, it was in Rails, React, and CoffeeScript. And I didn't really want to use CoffeeScript. I wanted to use just with vanilla JavaScript. I wanted to start getting used with like ES6 and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So even trying to follow the tutorial, but convert it from like the way it was written in CoffeeScript to just plain vanilla JavaScript, it it was it got I got a lot more out of it because I had to figure out what CoffeeScript was doing. Why would I do it this way in JavaScript? So even that little of a tweak
Mm-hmm.
made it I don't know. It made me learn more, and that's the cool thing. When you take a tutorial or an idea and you still have some guidance, but just the fact that you have to think about it more helps a lot.
Yeah.
You want to share one of the app ideas that you're sharing? You don't have to share the whole document, but maybe one.
Okay. One of the ideas is a Slack bot, and you can make it answer. For example, if you say hi to the bot, it will answer with a greeting, and it
Very
can.
cool.
Yeah.
A Slack bot, cool. That's going to be actually very neat. We can incorporate that into the Ruby project. Any comments or feedback so far for Jesus? What do you think, Ashley?
Hey, I think it's really
Well, I
cool.
just tried to like scroll up in his so I
You
could look through it. Go ahead. Sorry, Jamal.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just trying to scroll up in in Jesus's computer, like with my hand, and it didn't. Obviously it doesn't work. I was looking back up.
I've done that.
I like your. Let me see.
We can do
Are you doing
remote
this as a
scroll.
video?
Just tell Jesus, scroll up. Jesus, scroll down.
Yeah. I have videos.
Maybe we should start using
I
Screen Hero.
I have videos and ebook, so you have the 2 options.
Cool, cool. Is this is the video or this is the ebook
This is for the videos.
that you're showing
Yeah.
for the video? Okay.
Hey, Jamal, you had some comments also.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask. So like, I love that you're doing an intro to TDD.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I find difficult when I'm doing TDD is having tests, but also having your side effects of getting input from the user or outputting stuff to the screen. And I see you have that in your tic-tac-toe game.
Mhm.
How did you? I'm just curious. I mean, how did you handle that in your tests in a way that was kind of non-obtrusive to the message you're trying to get across? Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. So I don't test the user input in this case, but you can do that using something called mocks and stoops. And with that, you can create like fake objects that you can use instead of standard input. So you can have like a fake standard input and you can test against this fake object.
Oh,
But
okay.
in the example, I just test the game logic because I think that's where you get the most value.
Okay, so like your win conditions and you're making sure
Yeah.
the piece shows up at the right spot and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome.
No, I have another question, Jesus, and this is probably not part of this course, but what about adding, how would you go about, I guess, adding tests where there hasn't been tests before? So, maybe like inheriting a code base and there's no tests around it, and how do you approach starting to write tests?
Yeah, you could start with something called characterization test. And what you do is test the output. So you have, for example, one program that gives you one specific output with an input. You record the output of the program and then you make that a test.
Okay, so
So you test against the output of the program
and you said
directly.
this is a characterization test?
Yes. So if you are interested on that, there is a whole book called Working with Legacy Code.
Ooh, okay. Working with legacy code. Is it working effectively with legacy code?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll put a link on the hangout. Oh, there you go. All right, cool.
So so how does a characterization test differ from like a functional test? Or I forget,
Hmm.
there's another kind of test that tests kind of the whole system together.
Yeah, integration test.
Integration test, that's it.
Well, the integration test, you write it before and already know what the application is doing. Well, with characterization, just test the output of the program. You don't test the steps the program does to do something. You just test the output, the result of the program.
Okay. Okay, so it's kind of like wrapping it in like a harness or something so that you're not necessarily testing everything, you're just making sure it's still doing what it should.
Yes.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah, because you don't know where every part is breaking up. To start testing specific pieces, but you know what the end result is supposed to be, right?
Hmm.
So when you say record the result, what do you mean by that?
So, for example, if you have a program, a command line program, so I'm not talking with web application. I think for web application you need a slightly different process. But if you have a command line application and it gives you one output, you can, in Linux, for example, Windows type thing, you can save the output of the program into a file,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the idea is something like that. You save the output of the program in a file, and then you test against this output. And then you can refactor and move towards more unit testing.
So you said the process is a bit different for a web application. Would it would it still be called the same, or it's a different approach altogether?
Hmm. I don't know for
Yes,
sure.
I got one. Jesus knows everything, so it's good when I get him on something that he says that. All right, no, that's cool though. But yes, it's something to think about, especially once you start working on some code that you didn't write, and maybe there was some methods there that aren't exactly well tested, or maybe it's your own. You built something and now it got bigger and bigger, and now you want to go back and start adding tests in and working in a more uh, tested fashion. How do you even go about it? So for me, I think I get the concept of starting with tests, but it's harder to work backwards, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Any other questions, Ashley?
Hey, Angel, I just wanted to say that the fact that you called writing tests afterwards backwards is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's yeah, the whole mentality of it, but yeah. Sorry, Ashley. Go ahead. Any questions or comments?
No, no, no. That is an interesting thought, though. But I mean, I guess backwards, but I do feel like I agree with a couple of the sentiment that I've heard other places that like sometimes it doesn't make sense to write the tests first. Like sometimes you don't know what you want it to do yet until you fiddle around with the program or you fiddle around with an idea or you're hacking something together and then you write the tests to reinforce the results that you got. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally makes sense.
I
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
like to play in Pry or IRB to find
Mhm.
out what I want to do.
Yeah, I do that a lot too.
Yeah, I think as you
Okay.
start working with more, you end up a lot of code ends up in IRB or Pride first.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Hey, Shauna, how are you? You want to say hi?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. I'm glad you joined us.
Thank you. I'm a little bit late, so I'm not really sure what you guys are talking about yet.
We Jesus is working on a course for TDD, so he shared a little bit with us, gave us a little sneak preview, and so we were just having a little conversation about tests, and I asked about when you have to add tests to maybe like a code base that you inherited, or maybe you just started an app and you didn't start it with tests, and now how to go back and work on that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to share. So pretty cool, Jesus. Would you ever work on something where it's more on that scenario? I'm trying to get a new course out of you.
To mean a project without test?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like taking a project without tests and then working through it and adding tests and getting it to a decent coverage.
Well, I did something 2 years ago. I think it was a PHP application,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't have any tests, of course. It was pretty messy. There was a very big functions.php file, which had a lot of functions defined. It was like the biggest file.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a very important part of the application of the business logic, and I really wanted that part to make sure that part was working correctly. So I wrote a few tests for that part of the application,
Very cool.
and I think that helped us a lot.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I have to go back and work on some of that stuff myself. I think that I keep postponing it, but I gotta just do it.
Yeah, I've been putting off. The Odin project has their RSpec section asks you to go back to a game that you already, an app you already built, or not even an app really. It's just like a Ruby command line game. It's tic-tac-toe actually.
Mhm.
But it tells you to go back and start and like write tests for your existing code. But I've I actually ended up skipping over it and being like, well, I'm just gonna go straight into Rails. Like I learned some RSpec stuff, but I looked at my hairy, ugly tic-tac-toe game that I had built. I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can write tests for this. So, full disclosure, I still have that on my to-do list.
All right, I'm not the only one.
I think that's
Yeah.
sometimes one of the hardest things to do is to go back to code you wrote without tests and add them in.
Mhm.
Especially if you think it works, right? Like, you're like,
Right?
it's already working until you run into something that made it break, and you're like, oh yeah, I should have had tests. Were you gonna
Yeah,
say?
or going back to write the tests makes you face, like, well, it works, but it doesn't look good,
Mm-hmm.
this code. It's like it works, but if I tried to change anything in it, I would be really angry about it. And so I know that I've heard about people, like you said before, using tests to kind of fix legacy code and
Mhm.
refactor it. Um, but my code was so legacy, like so bad and embarrassing that I was like, I can't handle this right now.
You know what? Maybe that should be a project for Ruby Monday. Actually, we're gonna add tests to your code.
Oh God! You have to. You know what?
That would be pretty
You
fun.
know what?
Like have you do
That
it.
sounds like a really good idea.
You
And
should
I
think
can just
about
sit
that.
back and try not to defend my choices.
Yeah. You know what? We should all pick like a little project we worked on, and then that didn't have tests, and just kind of go through it.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. Maybe you're gonna volunteer to be the first one.
That's fine. Look at my ugly tic-tac-toe. It needs to be fixed or taken out of my GitHub so people can't see it.
There you go. Hey, so moving on to a new topic. Thanks, Jesus. The course looks awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So Ashley got a new app idea from today's Slack chat. So you want to go ahead and pitch it?
Yeah, so we were talking a lot about networking and applying for jobs, and today I actually got an email back from, I think it was Fog Creek, and I had applied to a job, and they were like, well, we already filled the position, but you should keep us in mind for the future. And this happens a lot, and what often happens is like you take that rejection and you just go like, oh well, I guess I'm not working there. But conventional wisdom says that you should continue to follow up and like look, apply again in a few months or keep up with their career page to see when they've got openings again or their Twitter or whatever. Um, but at a certain point, you've got so many companies on your list that it's hard to keep up with them all the time, as well as trying to apply to new ones and keeping your ear to the ground and coding. Like, God forbid you actually still keep practicing coding while you're trying to do all of this. So I had the idea for what would be effectively like uh, a custom, like a web crawler app almost.
Okay.
So the user experience would be basically you log into your app and you just got a little bit of information about a company that you're really interested in, but they're not hiring yet. So you could just enter the careers page into the application and say, watch for this kind of position, maybe a position that has developer in it or junior in it or Ruby in it or whatever it is that you think is going to work, and this app will periodically crawl those sites that you found that you've put into it and give you an alert or a notification in it when new jobs pop up. So it's almost like a Hired or a LinkedIn or something like that, but it targets specifically the companies that you want to be a part of.
Pretty cool. I like that idea.
I don't know how complicated that would be to implement, but it doesn't feel terribly complicated to implement, especially if you are, like, the interface is basically, putting in a URL for an
Right.
existing careers page,
So since it's Ruby Monday, why don't we talk about that a little bit? So let's break it down. What do you think we would need to implement this? Like what are the different pieces? So you have an initial job listing. You probably have an email of someone who you've been in touch with. What do you think would be some of the pieces? Let's brainstorm here.
Are you asking me specifically or the group?
Well, yeah, maybe we can start with you since it's let's do one piece and then maybe we can go through the group and see any other suggestions.
Oh, this is funny. That's really funny, Peter. Really? Okay.
That's awesome. So yeah, we're gonna leave Peter till the end. That we
All
can,
right,
we
yeah.
can compare after that to see what tools he's using. And feel free to
Um,
say hi, Peter. Sorry, I haven't given you the chance to say hello. We can't hear you, and you don't seem muted.
it
Nope.
looks like your mic is not working.
And I'm not that great at reading lips. So. It's all right. If you figure out the mic thing, don't. Oh yeah, the hangout
Uh,
on. No worries. So we can see your responses typed in. No worries. Or come back. But all right. So let's pick one piece. So you have this thing that you're thinking about building. What do you think would be one of the pieces that you need?
well, first you need to store individual, so you need a database component to this, or some kind of persistence component that would store the name of the company, any contacts you have, and the URL. Especially, like, requirement would be the name and the URL for the careers page for that company, because without that URL, there's no crawling. I suppose you could have just the name and rely on a search engine component to find the website and find the career page. But for sake of simplicity, inputting the URL would be my first iteration of the problem.
All right.
Crawling the same thing as scraping.
So let's, Shauna, do you want to kind of tell us what you're thinking about? Maybe that could be a different component. So we got some kind of data persistence, some kind of DB. So you're up, Shauna, if you're available.
Yeah. I guess I'll go ahead and ask my question now, but is crawling the same thing as scraping?
Ashley, I think that's probably what she meant. Is that what you meant, Ashley?
Yes?
So why don't
Yeah.
you explain what scraping is, Shauna, and that way we can figure out if that's what we're doing.
Well, I just have used like the gem no-go Gary to scrape information off of other websites, which I think it could break your app, like if they ever change information, so it might be better to use an API, but since it's like, I don't know, they're updating jobs, they probably don't have an API for that, right? It's
Right.
going to be no-go Gary. And then you had
You want to
mentioned
give us a brief overview of what Nokogiri does?
Nokogiri. It's a gem that you can download with Ruby, and you can basically insert a URL for a website and say you can pick out certain elements off the website that you want and like import the information. I don't know, bad description.
No, you're doing good.
I'm trying to remember when I've used it or what I've used it for.
And one of the cool things is it kind of takes the data from the website and then it lets you interact with it, right? So you can call different elements, you can call links on the website.
But as far as your app goes, I guess you want to have a model for all your companies and information, like you said, and just store all the information about them in their URL. And you also had mentioned that you want to do like a user, so you might have a user model. I'm not sure.
Oh, well, you added an important piece of the puzzle, being able to get information from the website. Does that make sense, Ashley?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, no Kogiri would be useful because you can interact with you can interact with it as an object. And it might be useful if what you're looking to do is, like the super duper simple version of this would simply come back with, hey, you should look at the careers page again because it looks like they have something for you, and then you would just navigate back to the same URL. But a more sophisticated version would probably fetch the article itself and the job description and send it to you in addition to the URL for that particular job description.
Right. Maybe instead of linking the URL to the specific job posting, you would link it to their job postings page where they post all of them.
Oh yes, certainly the careers page, not a particular posting. The particular posting would die and go away.
And so you don't go looking every time they make a new job posting because you could probably not care about like the sales postings or clerks or whatever other position you're not interested in. Maybe part of the component is scanning to see if there's like the keywords that you're interested in: Ruby, development, engineer, and I don't know. I'm thinking maybe some regex goes into that to match to different things, or maybe finding emails, links like that. So that might be another piece.
Yeah, I think regular expressions definitely come into it because, like you said, you don't want it to just tell you, hey, there's another career, and it be like a sales position.
Right, right. Cool. Yeah. All right, let's see. Jamal. Sorry, go ahead, Ashley.
Unless that's what you're looking for, obviously.
There you go, see? I don't know, I think Jamal's still jogging. He's probably like...
I'm still here.
All right, cool. You got any other pieces of the puzzle?
So you hit up persistence. You got scraping the pages, and even doing some like filtering criteria. I guess I'm going to pick something easy and say that you need some kind of user authentication so that you can track for individual users what they want to store. So you don't just have like everybody searches. You're going to have it separated out by users.
Right, because Ashley's of course going to open this up for all of us, so we want a user tool too.
I mean, that's what I was thinking.
Self-serving request, right?
If you wanted to expand the feature set to be even more social, you could even, give people the ability to message each other. Say like, say I get a post for a job that that sounds interesting, but I think that Jamal would be a better fit, or Jesus might be a better fit, or whatever. Or I say, hey, let's compete for this one, and you could share it with your friends or share it with your group, etc.
Oh no, Ashley, you already experienced your first expanded feature request.
I think it might be cool too if you somehow are able to link a Twitter account to a website, and then you can tweet out and say, hey, I'm interested in working at whatever company doing whatever job, and I signed up on this site or something like that.
Yep. Hey, Jesus, give us another brief.
Gross.
But don't we have everything already?
No, there's still other good stuff. Oh,
Okay.
hold on, hold on. I could say one for Jesus. Build it in Sinatra.
Yeah.
All right, Jesus, you got another piece that you can think of?
I'm not clear what we are doing. Is this for keeping track of your job applications, or or it's also crawling for finding you jobs?
I think so. The very, very, very specific use case for me is tracking specific companies that you're interested in because most job placement applications ask you to do searches for a particular role, right? And whether or not that role is um, and whether or not that role has already been posted. What I am looking for, what I'm looking to get out of this is to track particular companies that I'm interested in because I'm more interested, for a lot of times I'm more interested in the company than I am in the role, but there isn't like a as automated way to track like, hey, I talked to this company 6 months ago and they gave the job to somebody else, but I want to keep track of them to see when another opportunity will come up, or even the ability to have it remind you, hey, you talked to this person 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago or whatever. You should, a gentle nudge to reach out to them again to see if there are any other opportunities because this happens like weekly for me.
Yeah, I can totally imagine that. Like, you might have your ideal companies that you would love working for, and maybe they just don't have an open spot right now. So you just add them to your list, and once they do, you'll get notified about it.
Right, or you're a code newbie and they're like, well, we like to keep our eyes out for new talent, but we think that you're not ready yet. You're like, oh, okay, I'll see you in 6 weeks when I'm an ace at whatever technology I'm studying right now, if it's like one particular tool or whatever.
So Shauna picked up on one real quick. Go ahead, Shauna.
I just asked what are your ideas for how it would notify you? I guess just via email or text or.
So what do you think along those lines, Ashley? What was your ideal notification system? And then that's another piece of the puzzle, right?
It certainly is. The way that I track my job application, job search criteria right now is through Trello, but email is a good thing, and so are notifications through
Or
my phone. So I
or
don't know if, huh?
you already tracked through Trello, so
Right, I already tracked through Trello. So is there a way for me to like, does Trello have an API that I could leverage to have it come up with a notification? Yeah.
there you go. So we got some ideas. So maybe we're thinking of Trello API integration. We got to check if Trello has a good API. Email, Jesus likes email.
Yeah.
Really?
Text message.
What Shayna says.
Yeah. So we got options. Very cool. Now, I have another question. How are you scheduling checking if there was a change? How do we know? Because we can crawl it, but we can scrape the site, right? We,
Mhm.
we're got no Kagurian for that. But how are we scheduling when we're checking the site? How often are you doing so?
I would guess that um, it would be reasonable to allow somebody to say like check it every whatever, but I think every week is a good practice, certainly for jobs. But somebody might have a better idea than that than I.
Cool. No, I mean whatever the time frame is, right? It could be every week. It could be a setting you put yourself. But so what are you going to use to schedule
I don't know yet.
it? Any ideas, suggestions? What can we do to schedule this?
Cron.
You want to just go with cron jobs? This is Ruby Monday, not Unix Monday, Jesus.
Uh, I'll confess I was thinking cron jobs too.
All right, cron jobs could be the way, but there's a way, and actually, someone in the Newbie community, Clayton, I think, he did a cool talk in his local meetup. Cron jobs, but the Ruby way. There
Yes.
you go. It was the whenever gem, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to explain what the whenever gem is?
Locked and loaded, dude.
See? See, that's why Jesus is always like 2 steps away. I think Jesus is building your app right now, actually.
I want money for it.
But by the end of the call, all he's gonna do is transfer the GitHub repo to you and be done. All right, Jesus, sorry. You want to explain what the whenever gem does?
Yeah, the whenever gem,
And the screenshare is even better.
I haven't used it, but I had from Clay, um, and it lets you create cron jobs using Ruby. So there are some examples.
Yeah, would you mind bringing up the documentation of that? Because I think the examples are real neat.
Mm-hmm. So the documentation is in GitHub in the README, and you can see examples. If you can see my screen,
Yep.
can you, okay. So you can see every 3 hours, and you run this command or this rake task or this method, or you can also say every day at this time run this method, or every hour run this method, and this is the normal cron syntax. You can also use that and say command do this. So it's pretty simple from what I can see. And it saves you from having to remember the cron syntax.
Do you want to give an example of some cron syntax so we can compare it and why this is such a nice gem?
Yeah, you can see it here, but let me open my cron file. Cron, some cron daily. Yeah, so this is the cron syntax. I was looking for one that has a comment and it explains because I never remember. I know it's like minutes, that hours, day of the week, um, month, and year, something like that.
Yeah, it's not the friendliest thing to read.
Hmm. And you can have the specific time like this, or you can say asterisk, and asterisk means we run it doesn't care what month or hour it is. So if you say asterisk on the hour, it will run every hour at the first minute. That's the cron syntax.
Here, let me send you this link. Can you open that one? I think that does what you're looking for.
Cron make.
That's cool. It makes sense if you have like, yeah, it makes sense if you've done a little bit. Is cron
Oh,
There you go.
Unix based or what is it?
Yeah, it's a Unix
yes.
tool.
Unix, okay.
I sent you a link, Jesus, on the group
Hmm.
chat. I think that's
Okay.
probably what you're looking for.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the minutes, the hours, day of the month, day of the week.
So that's why the whenever gem is so cool because it just makes it, very, very friendly to schedule it, very Ruby. You don't have to have like all these notes to figure out what's going on. You just look at it and it's kind of like readable.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Hmm.
There you go.
The
All
wheels
right.
are turning.
The question now, Peter, what has matched up? What has been different from your approach?
Oh, now time for me to unmute.
There you go. Hear
Uh,
you.
and you can hear me. Don't use Chrome and Hangouts. It's the weirdest thing. Whenever Gem is a great way to avoid having to battle with cron. Although realize that whenever Gem is just a pretty interface on cron, and every time it
Right.
runs, exactly what it's doing is setting the cron on whatever machine it's running on. And also, if you're going to try and put this out on Heroku or somewhere else, you can't use that. You have to use something else. So it kind of gets into weird nuances depending on what you're going to do with your little app, where you're going to host it and things.
The other thing I had kind of thought around. Sorry to interrupt you. Right now that you said that, maybe Sidekick with Sidekick you could do a delay or schedule until. Schedule your next check with Sidekick, and then at the end of that you schedule the next one for a week later. I don't know how that would work.
I actually tried to code that once, and there's kind of a weird edge case around handling like double scheduling, and it gets ugly really fast. It gets bad really, really fast. So it's much better if there's something else that will take care of the problem for you.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what about the rest of the discussion? How did it line up to what you're building out?
Nokogiri's totally a +1, although learning XPath is a language. Just understand that and believe it, and that will help you be less frustrated, because learning how the selectors work and learning how XPath itself works and things, and even learning how Nokogiri handles result sets is huge. It's a huge deal, and there's a lot in there. It's one simple little gem, but the libxml library that it's wrapping around is enormous, and there's just so much in there to learn. I think the suggestions for the app that Ashley's looking to build, things like users and authentication and stuff like that, make a robust app. And I don't have the luxury of knowing what level you're at, to know kind of what you're thinking about building, and where you think you are with how to start, how to attack the problem. So it depends on what you want to do. If you're level up enough where the real challenge here is the website scraping and users and authentication and stuff like that you've done before, then that's cool. You can add them in there and focus on scraping the site. If you haven't dealt with either users and authentication before, kind of pick the thing that you are most interested in doing. And if that most interested part is how to make the scraper work and get the right thing off the web page and send you a notification when it sees the right stuff, don't worry about the user. Just wrap the important values in a variable, like in a constant at the top of the top of the class or something, so that you can put those inside, a user object or something sometime later on.
My thought usually with these is to, for something like this, where I have done like the easiest bit of user and authentication insofar as I have completed the Rails tutorial
Mm-hmm.
once. So it's like, okay, well, the knowledge is kicking around in my head, but the practice is not there. I
Right.
would definitely approach this from the point of view of making the web scraping logic and that work before adding users on top of it, certainly.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's
No.
really good advice because really, especially if you're trying to level up, you can always go back and look what you've done with user authentication before. But you want to focus on what's really going to level you up. If you haven't really worked too much with web scraping and no security and all that, I mean, that's going to be the main benefit for you.
And
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
you know, one thing you could do for your code that would make stuff easier is if you kind of think that you wish you had a user object, but you don't really want to go down the path of building the whole user class or something just to hold some values, you can use a struct. You just build a quick struct at the top of your class. That way you can still use method style calls to your user object, and have the hard coded values just right there. And then later on, it's easier to swap in because a user class is going to have method style value, attributes, and so then there will be less code to change later on.
Now, just a quick pause on that, a quick note. Let me ask Ashley, Shauna, I know Jesus knows, Jamal, do you know what he means by a struct?
I do, yes.
Okay. Jamal?
Yeah, I do.
And Shauna, I've been calling you Shauna all night, and I never asked you if I was saying your name right. I'm sorry. But feel free to clear it up.
Okay. It's actually pronounced Shayna, but that's okay. Happens all the time.
Sorry.
But I'm good.
Okay, so you have used structs before?
I'll say I haven't used structs in Ruby, so if you want to explain them, that would be a good thing.
Okay, so can you just explain a little bit of what a struct is, Peter? Or if you can do a screen share, then even a quick little sample would be even better.
Yeah, let me see what I can smash together quickly here.
Yeah, something simple, just to kind of illustrate the idea of what we're talking about, or you're talking about.
Hold on.
Oh, cool. Share that also in the links in the group chat, Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, by the time I asked if anyone was familiar with structs, he probably wrote that article. That's why his is so awesome. He's always like such a cool tool to have here, like a resource. And
Of course,
I still don't know when you sleep, Jesus. You know that, right?
when he sleeps.
Yeah, I message him at every time that I think he's gonna be sleeping, and he always answers.
I have an idea. Are you like Winston Churchill, Jesus? Do you just take like naps throughout the day so everybody thinks you're always awake?
You
Have
probably.
you heard that one?
You know what? That's gonna be the next Ruby Monday app. We're gonna build an app to find out when Jesus sleeps. Randomly ping him throughout the day, and we're gonna set a gap that it takes longer for him to respond, and we're gonna go, oh, that must be when he's sleeping. All right, sorry, Peter. Wait, of course. Go ahead.
Okay, so if you guys see my screen, do you guys see my screen share?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can see it. Open structure.
Okay, so this is like the most brutally simple thing there is. OStruct is a core class, and then basically you make a new object of OStruct and throw whatever the heck you want into it. And so now the cool thing is, so you have person age, but you have, I think this works.
Mhm.
It's like the most flexible thing in Ruby that there possibly is, which also, great power and great responsibility, right? You can
That
code
is so
yourself
funny, and I think this is
into a hellish place using these things. But this might be a quick and dirty way to build up a user object at the top of your code, so you can reference it in your code and kind of not worry all that much about building the whole class around it. It's just a data holder, and you can hard code all the values, and then when you get around to using the actual, building the actual user class, then you've already written into your code these references that basically are mapped the same way to active record as they do to OpenStruct. So everything sort of works out.
that is awesome. I had used structs, but I had never used OpenStruct. I didn't even know.
It's one of the dirty secrets in Ruby.
Yeah, yeah. I'm afraid OpenStruct is about to get abused by me this weekend. This is so cool.
I
Yeah,
can
keep hearing that.
so I can show you that this is going to look scary, but trust me, you don't have to be scared of this. So
Right.
this is a class doing a Nokogiri scraping of the website, and I wrote all of this in functional style, so all these things are in one line. But let me see where the page object is.
You know what? This is probably gonna derail us just a little bit, but you brought it up without, I think, thinking about it too much. What do you mean by functional style? Just to kind of clear up what the differences is, even in the style, even though you're still working with Ruby. Uh,
So well, here's the. Luckily, I'm like halfway in between code changes here, so I have both styles are like in flight in this code. So you see this comment block right here. This is really imperative style, which is the style we write almost all of our Ruby code. So
right.
you throw some variables together, you call some methods. Like your method, you output more variables. Now, by using instance methods, instance variables, then these methods start to reuse the variables in the instance. So you see here the page method is using agent and URL to get a page object,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's imperative style. Functional style, on the other hand, is doing your level best to ignore imperative style and only use input and output in a method. So listing rows. Listing rows is a method. It goes and asks if there's a header row. So basically, we just keep walking down these functions until we find something and kind of wrap our head around. Post table rows, post table. So here's the page. Here's a reference to the page.
Mm-hmm.
I could eventually write. Now the page method is this one we just looked at, but I could. All right. Still having like weird navigation things with my editor. But this is a Nokogiri object. So the way this is written, um, uh, the page method there is getting. It's actually going out there and requesting the HTML from the URL. And then at is one of the parsing methods in Nokogiri. And this thing is the searching the document object model on the page.
Right.
So it's looking for table HTML with a class called threads list. no, with an ID called threads list. And my parser does multiple different things. So if they can't find one there, then it looks for a table with a class called form line. And so each of these functions then build up, basically eventually build up to getting the important information out of an HTML table on the page. So I focus this table, and then the row data. So at some point I'm calling row data on every row in the table and getting the title and the date and the URL off the row.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I just wanted to kind of ask that because it's a lot of times, especially lately, there's been a lot of talk about functional programming and the advantages it brings. But unless you're experienced with it, which a lot of us aren't, especially if we started with Ruby, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it unless you actually see like a difference, a comparison.
Right. There's one more thing you can look into called memoization, which is a really simple concept. Basically, the first time I call this method, I want to go get the value from it. So this big, ugly line goes and does something and eventually gives me back an integer ID. But I don't want to call this method. I'm going to reference this value a whole bunch of times, but I don't want to re-execute this line all the time. I only want to execute it really once. So we use memoization. You call an instance variable, use Ruby's or get or assignment to take the value. So the first time this comes in, this instance variable is by default null. So then it executes the second side of the OR in lazy evaluation. And so the first time it executes the line. The second time we call the method, this has value, and lazy evaluation short circuits the test and just returns the value.
Very cool.
So I have a semantics question. I've been reading Hooter, and I've been thinking about good design, good code design, and one of the principles is have methods that do one thing. Can you explain how this is fundamentally different from that principle?
Functional programming is taking that principle to the extreme. There are a lot of large projects that would claim this is a method doing one thing. And the reality is that this method is doing far and away more than one thing.
Right.
It's returning one concept. Totally true. It's returning this conceptual thing. It's returning this hash with some data on it. But the doing to accomplish this concept is far, far beyond one thing. It takes hundreds of calculations to get here. And not just looping through something 100 times to get here, but hundreds of completely disparate, completely different calculations and code paths and things like that. And when this method blows up, odds are more than anything that it's going to be very unclear what the code path is into the place that created an exception. And the other part about it is, because this method is constructed of all of these steps, testing this becomes a nightmare, because if I want to test that header date call is doing the right thing, I basically have to set up the entire beginning of the method in the test environment. I have to like mock it or set it up or stub the methods or whatever is necessary so that I have a known code path when I get to actually executing this. And that's it's insanity. I mean, it's beyond just hard to do. It's just flatly insanity. On the
Right,
other,
right.
on the other hand, I have one method. I mean, this is just, it's basically renaming the method. I have a method called listings. It's renaming it to scrape.
Mm-hmm.
So listings is doing one thing, return this hash. The hash is comprised of several method calls.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to test that Ruby can build a hash correctly. Ruby can build a hash correctly. It's a foregone conclusion. So I don't even have to put a test in listings because there's nothing to test. Now I can test listing rows. So we go down to listing rows and we kind of look at what it's doing. It's calling header row and it's calling post table. Well, to test this, I don't have to construct all the prerequisites for header row. I just have to stub the method.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have a little bit of, you know, a premonition to know, well, header row is going to return an array or nil. Okay,
Right.
so I test it with nil and I test it with array, stubbed in, but I don't have to know anything about the prerequisite of that method in order to correctly test listing rows.
Right.
And then the exact same story is for all the rest of this stuff. Post table rows, I don't really have to I don't have to know what that method does. I just have to have some premonition about what it's going to return, and then go from there. You know, it's an array that probably has an object, so when I try and index on header row, it returns the array index where that object is found. So testing this now is very easy. I have a couple things to stub, a couple code paths to try out, and then that's it. That's all there's to try.
I mean, I'm like fangirling hardcore over here. This is great.
This things like you know, the sticky test. I mean, this doesn't really even justify a test. I mean, all we're doing is an array select from a regular expression, but up here, you know, I'm either going to find a row that has rating and thread in it, or find a row that has picture and description in it. So, okay, you know, there's a reasonable expectation that I might have a couple spec around that, just to make sure that something insane is not happening. I don't have the regex written wrong or something like that, which I had the regex written wrong a few times before I was trying to do this all inside one regex, and I kept on beating the head against it. Just went, okay, I just have to use logical operations here instead. But that's exactly the kind of thing. If I had to think about all the prerequisites of what it took for me to just test this row before I could even get around to testing regex, the test itself would be insane. Instead, the test does nothing but mock post table rows, and then it just runs, and it returns. You know, I mean, the result then is very, very easy to get, because you either get the row you sent into it, or you get nothing, and then your test fails. So that's the motivation behind functional programming, is to break this stuff down into strictly the most primitive single thing that does some work, so that the prerequisites in the method are as simple as possible.
So am I right in guessing that this is not the only language, that Ruby isn't the only language that you gravitate toward?
No, I honestly, you know, full disclosure, I learned about this stuff inside the last 3 months. Because I've been studying Haskell.
That's awesome.
So Haskell is 45 years old, I think.
Yeah.
If you include Haskell's, if you include the languages that Haskell was derived from, it's like 45 years old. But I'm not sure if I can get to a decent example.
Well, there's a guy here in town that really touts functional programming, and he's actually mentoring a friend of mine, and offered to mentor me if I wanted to ever learn Haskell. Have you found that that you, I mean, it obviously informs your Ruby programming
Um,
to a certain extent.
so
Oh, hello.
there's a somebody's raising the roof for Elm.
Yeah, that's me.
Um,
Also on my list. I have so much list.
sure. So, well, here's the funny thing to me, and that is that okay. So, go back to that, my car example here. So we've kind of done this stuff in Ruby, but there's a leap in concept from here to Haskell, Elm, Clojure, in that our method definitions are static. So as soon as I've defined this symbol, Ruby knows it's a function symbol. It knows it's a method. It knows what the argument list is, and that's statically created. So Ruby gives us ways to fudge the argument list. So we can do star rows, star keyword arg, and even so there's the canonical, completely flexible Ruby method. This is exactly the signature for method missing. It takes any number of arguments, any number of keyword hash style arguments, and a block. And then you can use those things inside the function body. But that's really the only way we have to deal with a dynamic function. And then inside here, I have to test on rows. I have to is there anything inside there? I have to test on the keyword args. Is there anything inside there? If I'm doing block stuff, I yield with block, right? So this makes things muddy and starts to kind of fly in the face of the functional style where all the methods are supposed to look like this. And on the other hand, in Haskell, we define our method, and if Haskell kind of goes part of the way to this absolute flexibility. So Haskell doesn't give us absolute flexibility, but it tells us that you can tell us what the possible inputs and the output is for this method. So we can tell it that it takes an int and a string and ultimately outputs an array of ints. I'm just making stuff up. But when I'm defining the actual method itself, I can say, well, okay, I'm going to take the int and I'm going to just ignore the string. And then I'm going to make another definition of this where I'm going to ignore the int and only take the string. And another one even where I'm going to actually accept both.
No.
And doing this, so now what I have is this, it's kind of like this dynamic thing, but the stuff I would have inside, are there any rows, would be the definition of this one. The stuff I have inside, are there any keyword args, would be the definition of this one. The stuff I have where both are defined would be this one. So now the method definitions are really back to, I took a complex method and drove it back into the defined style. Where this is basically just one line to accomplish that thing. So that's what Haskell is trying to do, get to here. And that's such a large leap from where Ruby's at that it's hard to just
Nope, I think
Yeah.
you muted.
Oh, did
Oh
I?
yeah. No, somebody else did.
You're good.
Somebody muted me because I've been going on too long. There's
So
a
wait, am I misunderstanding if I think that for the same functionality as your super flexible non-sticky Ruby function, you have written effectively 3 explicit Haskell functions?
yes, but the three
Okay,
explicit Haskell functions separate the possible inputs.
right.
So it's making a distinction between the range and domain of inputs. So the
Creating flexibility for explicitness.
yeah, and there are ways to get around even if you want the argument to be an integer or a string, there are ways to get around that. There are ways to handle that. You can take abstract lists of stuff and deal with them. And that's really where it gets powerful, because one of the things in the Haskell form, if I tell you that it's going to take an array of, right, there's a way to signify it like just general object. I don't remember what everything. And so then in the definitions, I could type, it would be helpful. So here I can say, okay, if it's a if thing is a if now this is where we get into recursive programming. So if the lead thing is a string, and do something. If the lead thing is an int, then do something else. So what's happening then is this array is going to get split up by the compiler into the head thing and the tail of the list. And so then in our method call, we do something with the head, and then recall the method with the tail. And this is one of the other things in tail recursion. One of the other things in functional programming, we have this thing called tail recursion, which is this construct right here. And because the functional languages are statically compiled with declared types, then they can do an optimization. It's called tail call optimization. So instead of this resolving into basically it by brute force, this resolves into this big long list of calls to non-sticky. So you get non-sticky, X, non-sticky, Z prime.
Right. You get a call for every element in that list, right?
Right, and it just goes down the path. So this is a brute force thing, but in tail call optimization, at runtime, the compiler figures out that it can keep a list of the somethings as it's going down the list, and continually traverse the list through the second half while it's collecting up these in the process. Ultimately, what's happening is tail call optimization is allowing this recursive call to be transformed into an iteration of the list. And when it can do an iteration of the list, then it doesn't consume the stack. And so when Z is 1 to a bazillion, this still works, even on a method that consumes a lot of processing. This still works because we're not going to build the stack up with a bunch of objects that have to stay in memory the whole time. The compiler is going to optimize this and effectively turn it into a traversal of the list. And so the only thing in memory at the time is the collected result and the processing of the item that it's looking at.
Very interesting.
And this is some of the stuff that happens from functional programming. Some of the other stuff that happens is there are things about the way we have to call our enumeration methods. So calling reject here or select and telling it I want to do this to each item in the list. Well, instead in the functional programming way, with the syntax we get, this is a lot more elegant. And so this call in functional programming turns into something of the kin. We get to call reject on any enumeration. I think we can tell that I want to reject the rows, and then on each row I call text and match it with something. So it'll be like text match, blah, blah, blah.
That looks very similar to what you would type out in Elm.
Yes, because Elm is directly descended from Haskell.
Yeah, right now that you're typing that, it looks pretty much spot on to what Elm would be doing.
Yeah, and so that's some of the optimizations that we get from functional programming. In Ruby, we can go halfway. So I can get down to methods that kind of only do one thing, and calls that are somewhat easy to read through, and then from there we have to do what we can. So.
Thanks, Peter. That was great. That was great to see that explanation of it.
This was a huge derivation from how do you scrape a page, but
no, but it's awesome. I mean, that's the cool thing about kind of getting in a hangout and talking about things. There's interesting conversations to be had all over the place, even when you're not even thinking that that's where it's going to go. So thanks for sharing.
I'm using the mechanized gem. I walked into this code legacy, and someone else had written some of it. But mechanize is really, its use is for manipulating the page, so like filling out a form or something like that. For what I'm using it for, it's completely unnecessary, but mechanize happens to wrap Nokogiri.
Yeah. So
this call to agent get URL is just invoking Nokogiri on the URL, and there's a Nokogiri open or URL method or something like that that does exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's easy in that getting started, getting the Nokogiri object into place is the easy part.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Thanks a bunch.
You're welcome.
And I definitely like Elm very much, and I think it's a good way to start learning a little bit of functional, especially because it's only messing with your front end, right? Elm is only front end, so you can play with that and still have what you're used to on the back end and building that out. So yeah, I think it's good to learn. The more you learn, the more your overall code gets better, not just your Ruby. Let's see. So Ashley, how was that for getting you going on your app?
I mean, I'm gonna start it. Oh, bye, Peter.
Yeah, Peter, thanks.
Bye, all.
And he's not lying. I see that low battery.
Yeah, right.
He wasn't just trying to trick us.
No, that's a lot of information, and it's all really. I mean, I always like a good, functional programming rant because, like I said, it's on my list, and at a certain point, I'm feeling like I should just try it. And I did listen to a podcast about Elm and was like, oh, maybe I could just bypass JavaScript entirely because I don't like it.
Yeah, we're on the same boat.
I'm not the only one.
Hey, Jesus, do you love JavaScript? Jesus is asleep. Finally.
We figured it out.
No. I'm good.
But yeah, so Ashley, feel free to like start building your app and bring up like specific questions, like wherever you're getting stuck or how to do something. That'd be awesome to see your app built out.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like the right thing to do. I've apparently lost interest in actual, tutorials and that kind of thing. I'm just like, you want me to, you want me to build another to-do app? God, that's boring.
Yeah, there's nothing like building out something on your own. They're really
Yeah,
good because you cannot Google your app. You're gonna have to Google pieces of it, and
right.
not even the right pieces sometimes. So it really pushes your learning for it. I saw my clone smile at that because I think he agrees.
Yeah, I definitely do.
When I had just finished my online thing, the boot camp that I went to, I built something very easy. Now, like looking back, it was very easy. It was just an app that every time you logged in, the counter would go up, and if you forgot to log in one day, then it would reset to zero. And it was just that was your landing page. Like if you logged in, it would say how many days in a row you've logged in, and if you forgot to log out one day, then it would reset back to zero. And the idea behind it was to just kind of help you build a habit. So if you did something one day, you check it in, and the counter goes up, and it tells you how many days in a row you've done it. So nothing too complicated in thought. And then when I started building it out, and there's no tutorial for it whatsoever, you realize, oh man, like this really pushes you to learn and start getting used to things.
Yeah, definitely.
And we can get Jesus's app ideas to go along with it. So, all right. Anything else? Anyone else wants to share? I'm excited to have Jamal on because I don't I feel guilty doing this, but yeah, he's got a cool Python Thursday thing going. So yeah, if you're into that type of stuff on a Thursday, check it out. I
Oh,
guess.
aw, thank you, Angel. This was actually pretty awesome. I like the idea of walking through an app and deconstructing it and coming up with ideas. That's really cool.
Cool, cool. And I have to leave pretty soon, but any questions or any closing thoughts? Let me start with Shayna.
No, looking forward to coming back. I've only been to Coatney's Ruby chat like once, and I had to leave early. And today I came late, so I'm looking forward to next week. And I guess every week, are we going to be building? Are we actually going to build this app, or is this just Ashley's project?
This one in particular is Ashley's project. At the beginning of the Hangout, I went over that what I would like to do, and you can all tell me if it's a good idea or a bad idea, is have it like a live Google Doc or maybe even in the Slack channel somewhere, and just post questions or topics you want to hear about or something you want to discuss, or maybe you're stuck on a code challenge, and just post it, and it'll be something good to talk about during the Hangout.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why today, I just kind of asked, like, what are y'all doing? And it was a cool thing to walk through, and we got to see some our TDD stuff. We got to talk about an app idea, and then all of a sudden we were into functional programming, which was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Jamal, any closing thoughts?
Um, I just want to say that if you are interested in functional programming, check out Clojure. I've been checking that out this year, and it's pretty cool. It's a Lisp dialect. On the JVM, I'm just scratching the surface. I don't have a whole lot of knowledge in there yet, but really interesting stuff. Very similar lines to what Peter was showing with Haskell.
Nice, nice, very cool. Thanks for sharing that. Ashley,
Closing thoughts?
yeah, or any closing question or anything pending that we didn't you wanted to ask and didn't get a chance to?
No, I mean, I'm very glad to have been able to talk about my ideas that they just like popped. That's like one of the first ones that have popped up and had and been like, oh, I could really use this, and it doesn't feel like it's out of reach, and it feels like it could be useful for more than just me, and it feels like it could be a real app. Like I've had ideas before and I've written them down, but none of them has felt quite as worthwhile, for lack of a better word. So, and I appreciate this format. I think I like the little free form, let's discuss some stuff format.
Awesome. I'm glad. I'm glad. Jesus,
Yeah.
are you ready to transfer the GitHub link to Ashton?
Not yet.
All right. Anything else you want to share before we end?
Well, I'm looking for post ideas. If there is anything you want me to cover or write about.
Yeah, well, for me, one of those would be the adding TDD to an existing code base. If you can write anything on that, I think that would be awesome.
Okay.
The other thing, and I had put it in the doc, but we ran further on time. We can maybe chat about it. I ran into Marshall, Ruby Marshall, in some code that I was looking at, and I started looking at what it was. I
Hmm.
I I read the docs. I know what it is. I'm trying to figure out what the practical application of it is.
Okay.
So that would be interesting also. So
Yeah.
whether a post or a chat for next week would be cool.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. It's always a good time to have people join up. Feel free to come back. Slack channel, post questions. Jamal, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone, thanks a bunch. We'll see each other next week.
Bye.
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 Bye.